from the Liberal Party bench is going to be in the province of Quebec, and you can bet your bottom dollar that they're going to be asked to go to Terrebonne.
Despite the polling numbers we've been seeing here in Canada, Carney is being humiliated on the world stage. Welcome back to Moose and Loose. My name's David. Today we have a scathing article absolutely ripping Mark Carney apart. We got some updates from the Strait of Hormuz, oil prices, multiple new polling data, including some good news. We got a bunch of other stuff. Let's jump into this. Starting this episode off, we got some new nanos data here. This is 32% for the Conservative, 46% for the Liberals. We've got some other polling data, but before we get to that, we got this one from the National Post saying your private property may not be safe from Aboriginal title. So on this podcast, it says Dwight Newman discusses consequences of Cowichan ruling and Musqueam deal. This nonsense here, I've been saying this is going to absolutely tank the NDP and Mark Carney's numbers because they're both doing it. They're both involved in these deals. And what do we have today? Look at this. Polling data coming from British Columbia. The BC Conservatives 47%, the NDP down to 39. This is unreal how quickly this flipped. Thrown the threat of some land seizure and suddenly people are no longer voting woke. So this needs to continue, at least get one province back. We can start snowballing things here out from the west, maybe straighten things out. I don't know what's going on in Alberta right now. There seems to be an uprising of liberals. I would love to see a by-election coming out of Alberta and see if that's really true or if it's just hocus pocus data. We've got this one from Kirk. It says Canada has become the perfect combination of increasing labor costs and low productivity. Can't imagine a worse combination to invest in. This is absolutely insane. Canada's competitiveness eroded by growing productivity gap. The first one here is output of per hours worked. Productivity has absolutely tanked here in Canada. You can see America surging. And on the other side, our labor costs are far higher than the Americans. Moving ahead, we've got some news coming out of Iran. We've got the Strait of Hormuz here, which basically all the oil gets shipped out of. The tankers have to go in and then back out. Iran has threatened to bomb any of the tankers that go through there, and now it's come out that Iran is saying that any Arab or European country that expels Israeli and US ambassadors will get free passage through the Strait of Hormuz starting tomorrow. I don't think they get to call the shots. You can see the ships are not going through, but that's because they're turning off their transponders, and then you see they pop up on the other side here. So they are going through, just a lot of them are doing it in secret. There are a bunch you can see just off camera here that are all sitting here and waiting. So some ships are going through, others are not. And once this gets flowing again, then oil prices will come back down. Moving ahead, we've got this one right off the Prime Minister of Canada account. It says this week, Prime Minister Mark Carney will travel to Norway. That's right. He doesn't want to be in the House of Commons too long, doesn't want to be held accountable for everything he's doing abroad. All his Brookfield deals in Australia and India and Japan. So now he's going to go over to Norway and do some more. Not only that, there's a debate last night on Canada's stance with Iran, and of course Mark Carney didn't show up for it. What a pitiful display of weak leadership. We got Melissa posting this here, Prime Minister Carney to travel to Norway and the United Kingdom to strengthen collective defense and security, and highlighting this in a more dangerous and divided world. He just has to use that on every single official release he puts out to scare Canadians. It's just deplorable. And this one from CTV says PM Carney heading to Norway to watch NATO exercises. What exactly is he doing over there? I think he's just getting away from Canadian media. That's all he's doing. He just quickly called up somebody and said, hey, will you take me? I got to get away from Canada. I don't want to be asked any questions. Now we have received this piece of information. I put it in the previous video that it was rumored that Annette Ryan would be the new PBO because Carney doesn't want Jason Jacques, who is hailed as one of the greatest PBOs ever. So he's brought in this person that, well, he knows. Not only does he know Annette Ryan, he went to Oxford with Annette Ryan and Chrystia Freeland. So here we have Wayne Long confirming this.
I have the honor to table in both official languages the certificate of nomination with biographical notes for the proposed appointment of Annette Ryan as Parliamentary Budget Officer for a term of 7 years.
Liberals being liberals here. So other details about Annette Ryan, we've got this here. Annette Ryan is Deputy Director of Enterprise Policy Research Program Sector of FinTrack and the Chief Financial Officer. She went to Oxford the same years as Mark Carney, roughly around 1991 to 94, 95. Same years as Chrystia Freeland. Moving ahead, we've got this from the streets of Toronto, which must be absolutely spiking the TDS. We've Iranians chanting "Thank you, Trump" in the streets. And we can't have the YMC music in there, but you got the idea. Yeah, so the people of Iran absolutely loving Trump. And, well, you can only imagine the people of Toronto that are not a fan of Donald Trump, which is probably most of them, are not taking too kindly to this. Moving ahead, we've got Mark Carney getting scolded in multiple publications. First off, we've got this one here. Coming from Policy Magazine here, Canadian Politics and Public Policy. This article talks about Carney walking this New World Order tightrope. As it says, Ottawa cannot avoid taking a position. But the more the Prime Minister tries to walk the tightrope of distancing Canada from Donald Trump, Trump geologically, while acquiescing to his worst impulses, the less Canadians will trust the government's conduct of our foreign policy. Now, this article is not all that scathing. It's just saying Carney's taking a weak position here, which is no position. But as we move along here, we've got this one from The Guardian. This is where it starts to get worse. Mark Carney has a prescription for middle powers in uncertain times, but Australia isn't heeding the call. So these two quotes right here, the former central banker is impressive, but despite the buzz around his prescription for our uncertain times, Australia actually isn't listening to what Carney has to say. For all his stylish diplomacy, both Labour and the coalition appear to be pretending the rupture Carney has identified has not happened at all. So this is starting to get scathing here, basically saying what Carney's saying is not important, nobody's taking it serious. And then once we step over to this article coming from Al Jazeera, this is absolutely ruthless. Carney confirms when Washington whistles, Ottawa salutes. The Canadian Prime Minister was quick to jump on the Iran war bandwagon, seemingly forgetting his own speech at Davos. Recently, Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney struck the tone of a thoughtful statesman at the annual gathering of the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland. His speech in January was greeted with the sort of reverent approval reserved for leaders who sound serious about global responsibility. Carney's appearance at Davos was also meant, I suspect, to signal that Canada would be a modest, moderating force in a chaotic, tumultuous world. He warned of the perils of geological brinkmanship. He spoke about restraint. He urged the world's most powerful governments to resist the easy seduction of reckless escalation. Only weeks later, Carney's address reads less like a staple of principle and conviction and more like a cynical, disposable work of bad fiction. In a predictable volte-face, Carney has backed an illegal war that he helped implied prudent powers should be avoiding. The war on Iran being prosecuted by an emboldened American president and an Israeli prime minister allergic to nuance, diplomacy, and restraint bears all the blatant trademarks of the impulsive thinking Carney claimed to mistrust. The flimsy construct that Canada's prime minister is the nascent guardian of measured statecraft dissolved instantly after he confirmed that, like many of his compliant predecessors, when Washington whistles, Ottawa salutes. The old familiar instinct remains comfortably intact. For a leader who entered politics with a reputation for sober analysis, forged during his time at the Bank of Canada and the Bank of England, this defining moment reveals an instructive lack of foresight and introspection. This thing just goes on and on and on. So it goes on to say Carney's admirers portray him as a technocrat who would replace slogans with evidence and rashness with deliberation. It says Carney has now established that he's not a serious antidote to the politics of expediency that he promised to transcend. He is simply its more articulate custodian. Delivering pleasing speeches is easy. Challenging a war championed by an imperious president is, it turns out, much harder. So it just goes on to blast Trump and what he's doing here, all the different pow-pows and targets they've hit, etc. And then it goes on to say the hypocrisy deepens when one considers the essential character of a president whose war Carney has chosen to embrace. Canada is abetting an erratic demagogue who has openly contemplated erasing the country's sovereignty while simultaneously enacting loyalty for his war of choice. If there is a coherent logic behind this cockeyed posture, it is difficult to discern. Perhaps the calculation in Ottawa is that loyalty today will be purchasing goodwill tomorrow. So if it reflects a remarkable misreading of the United States President Donald Trump's brass-knuckled political instincts, this leader who regards concessions as weakness and obedience as entitlement, allies who fall in line rarely earn respect. They invite further demands, which makes Canada's deference to Trump not only morally bankrupt, but strategically naive. It's been a long time since I've seen an article be so scathing and so brutal against Mark Carney. So this article then goes on to mention Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez in Spain pushing back against Trump. They had the whole kerfuffle about them not using their airstrips and all of that. And then later on here, it just wraps up and says Carney has opted to follow rather than to lead. He has forfeited conscience in favor of complicity. In due course, he will be judged harshly for what he did, not for what he said. So Canada has basically become a laughing stock here. The majority of Carney's voters are 50 plus. They watch CBC all day, have no idea how the world works, why our country's tanking so bad, and they don't seem to care. They don't even want to open their minds to what's going on in our country, how to fix it. We have an extremely high cost of living, housing, food, insurance, everything, you name it, cost of fuel. Somehow this has to end. Either things get so outrageously bad, people revolt or people leave, or Canadians wake up. Something has to happen here. The system is breaking. So it is refreshing to see articles like this that are truthful and honest for once, because we sure don't get that in the mainstream media in Canada. Moving ahead, we got a clip here on CBC, Kate Harrison commenting on the by-elections. So just to recap the situation here, Mark Carney called 3 by-elections, and each by-election say they can spend $100,000 each. I don't know what the final number will be, but say they can do that. Then the Liberals are going to spend $300,000 just to promote the Terrebonne riding to try to win that one, because they're going to easily win the other 2. Now the Bloc, they're only running a candidate in the Bloc riding, so they can only spend $100,000 as a party to promote that riding. Now technically, Yves Francois Blanchette could run fake candidates in Toronto to increase their spending. I saw a quote somewhere that saying that he's not going to do that because they're a party of morals and character. So essentially hamstringing himself against the Liberals in the next by-election. Now here we've got Kate Harrison commenting on the by-election on CBC.
Into these by-elections, how do you think he's going to approach these in the weeks ahead?
Well, I think any opposition party is going to point to the cost of living crisis that many Canadians face. By-elections tend to be flashpoints in time, and we've seen surprising results happen. I think back to last year when the Conservatives unexpectedly took the riding of Toronto-St. Paul's from the Liberals, and that was a flashpoint in time, partially driven by Conservative popularity at that moment, but also more immediately the conflict between Israel and Palestine that played a role in that riding in particular in terms of motivating voters. So what will voters be dealing with in 3 weeks' time? I think, we'll see where we are in terms of trade and Trump. It's possible that Quebec voters might say Mark Carney's had, a year to try and land an agreement with President Trump. We may not be further ahead, so I'm going to choose to vote for a candidate that's going to put Quebec interests and Canada's interests more prominently at the fore. I think the Liberals are more worried than they may let on. They have made this a very short by-election, the shortest it could possibly be. And it is also notable that it happens the day after their major convention in Montreal. That means every cabinet minister, volunteer, grassroots organizer from the Liberal Party bench is going to be in the province of Quebec, and you can bet your bottom dollar that they're going to be asked to go to Terrebonne. If they thought it was a lock, I think that they've set the conditions such that they're a little more worried than they may let on.
And if the issue...
That's very telling there. All their people are going to be in Quebec. Obviously, they're all pushing their efforts on this. And I think Canadians, Conservatives should rally and try to support the Bloc here in winning this. This solidifies everything. If Carney gets this, he's going to roll out draconian powers. We can kiss Canada goodbye.
So much is like this is a majority or it's not. Does it benefit Pierre Poilievre at all to bring up the legitimacy of such a gain?
I think one of the reasons the Prime Minister may not have pulled the plug and just foregone the by-elections and had a general, because I think it's unlikely that he would do that in the spring time frame, given what we've seen with the by-elections. One of the reasons he may have chosen to do that is because he felt he could be punished by voters for trying to seize a majority, kind of through back channels. And I think that Canadians have, at least from a public opinion perspective, said that they have some discomfort. They'd like to see floor crossers run in by-elections themselves. So I think that there's a lot of factors that go into that. But really, by-elections themselves tend to be what is most immediately in front of me. I think there's a lot of Quebec voters that were Bloc supporters that feel too much time lapsed between a decision on Terrebonne and the result that was delivered last spring. And so maybe they are more motivated to come out, those Bloc supporters, if they feel that they've been not heard because of the result. Yeah,
it's absolutely ridiculous how long it took. I mean, clearly the mess up there cost the Bloc to lose that seat. The Liberals have been sitting on it for the past year. It shouldn't take a year. It should be a week or two, and then it's decided. Like, why is it taking a year? Why does everything have to be so slow in this country? Oh, this is an interesting update and not a good one. I just showed in the previous video, or maybe a couple videos ago, the Terrebonne projection here on Polywave, and the Bloc were up by about 7%. Now they're tied on here, 39 apiece, basically. One must wonder, should all the Conservatives vote for the Bloc in this case? You add another 15% to this, the Liberals can't win. Just saying. I think this is a hinge moment in time where it's good versus evil. Moving ahead here, we've got Michelle Rempel-Garner absolutely ripping apart these Liberals. She is ruthless, and as Vesper pointing out here, he's convinced that she's actually a monster slayer cosplaying as a politician.
The law says under IRPA, right, section 130 or 166, I believe, is that proceedings before your division must be made in public. Is that correct?
Not for the refugee claimants.
Actually, section 166 does say that, right?
I don't have the act with me.
I do. It does. The story my colleague mentioned said that before arriving in Canada, the Iranian citizen was a senior member of his government, according to the Border Services Agency, which asked your division or your board to order his expulsion. To Mr. Bush, would your agency have recommended deportation based on those grounds without significant evidence? Like, would you have told the IRB that he should be deported, this person should be deported because he was a senior member of the Iranian government if you didn't have evidence to that effect? Would you have made that up?
What I will tell you is the process of it all. So
yes or no? Would you have evidence?
Yes.
Okay. So, Ms. Broussard, in what universe would you go against Section 166 of the law, of your law, and withhold this person's identity from the public? Why would you do that?
If you, Madam Chairperson, if I can just specify, any claim before the Immigration Division.
This is a deportation hearing, though, right?
All proceedings before the Immigration Division are also held in the absence of the public if they involve or if the member orders valid order. So not all.
So this member of the Iranian regime wanted his hearing in public and you are in private and you guys granted it. What possible interest would that serve the public? Like, I mean, you're saying you don't even know who this person is. And now you can't tell us why this would be in the public interest to withhold his identity from reporters?
It says that we withhold identity into when the claimant, if the person makes a claim to refugee status.
But why would you protect the identity of a senior Iranian government official in Canada on a deportation order requested by the CBSA? That's crazy.
That is crazy. We need to have laws in place where if we have public sector workers not acting in Canada's best interest, then they can be charged for breaking the law.